1990. The Berlin Wall just fell. The internet didn't exist yet. A gallon of gas cost $1.16. And if someone had handed you $1,000 and said, just invest this and don't touch it, what would it be worth today in 2026? The answer depends entirely on where you put it. Some assets turned $1,000 into $3,000. Some turned it into $300,000. And one turned it into something so absurd, most people won't believe it. Today, we're going through every major asset class: stocks, gold, real estate, bonds, cash, individual stocks like Apple and Amazon, and the one that changed everything. Buckle up, because some of these numbers are going to shock you. Let's start with the worst option: cash. If you put $1,000 in a jar in 1990 and hid it under your mattress, today it would still be $1,000, technically. But here's the brutal truth: inflation has destroyed its purchasing power. In 1990, $1,000 could buy roughly $2,300 worth of goods in today's money. So, in real terms, your $1,000 cash is now worth about $435. You actually lost 56% of your purchasing power by doing nothing. This is why financial experts say holding too much cash long-term is one of the most dangerous things you can do. Cash feels safe, but inflation is a silent tax that eats it alive every single year. Next, a basic savings account, or U.S. Treasury bonds. In 1990, savings accounts were actually paying 6 to 8% interest. Not bad, right? But rates have been falling for decades. If you averaged around 3% per year over 36 years, $1,000 becomes approximately $2,900 today. Bonds performed slightly better. AAA corporate bonds averaged about 5.3% return, turning $1,000 into roughly $6,500. Better than cash, but when you adjust for inflation, you barely kept pace. Bonds are not wealth builders, they're wealth preservers. Safe and boring, but they won't make you rich. Now we're getting into real money: real estate. If you put $1,000 into property in 1990 based on the Case-Shiller Home Price Index at a 4.4% average annual return, your $1,000 becomes approximately $4,600 today. But that's without leverage. Here's where real estate gets interesting. Nobody buys a house with just $1,000. They use a mortgage. If that $1,000 was a down payment on a $20,000 property and that property grew at the same rate, you'd be looking at $92,000 today. That's the power of leverage in real estate. And you had rental income along the way. Real estate doesn't look as impressive as stocks on paper, but when you factor in rent income, tax benefits, and leverage, it's been one of the most reliable wealth-building tools for American families for generations. Gold, the ancient store of value. In 1990, gold was trading at around $383 per ounce. In 2026, gold has hit over $3,300 per ounce, an all-time record driven by the Iran war and global uncertainty. So $1,000 invested in gold in 1990 is now worth approximately $8,600, an average annual return of about 6.5%. But here's the interesting thing about gold. Most of the gains came recently. Gold did almost nothing from 1990 to 2000, then slowly climbed through the 2008 crisis, then exploded in 2020. And then, in 2025 and 2026, gold had its single biggest year in decades, up 75% in 2025 alone, as the Iran conflict sent investors rushing to safety. Gold doesn't produce income, it doesn't compound, but when the world falls apart, gold is where people run. Now we're getting to the real winner for most investors: the S&P 500 Index Fund. If you put $1,000 into an S&P 500 index fund in January 1990 and reinvested all dividends, by 2026 you would have approximately $39,300. That's a return of 3,831%, an average of 10.66% per year, every single year. Through dot-com crashes, through 9/11, through 2008, through COVID, through the Iran war of 2026, you just held, and your $1,000 became $39,300. This is why Warren Buffett tells ordinary people to buy index funds, not because it's exciting, because it works. No stock picking, no timing the market, just $1,000 in 1990, completely ignored, becoming nearly $40,000. The most boring strategy produced one of the best results. Now, individual stocks. Let's start with Apple. In 1990, Apple was a struggling company, nearly bankrupt, trading at around 30 cents per share adjusted for splits. If you had put $1,000 into Apple in 1990 at 23.5% average annual return, you would have approximately $2.7 million today. $2.7 million from $1,000 in 36 years. Apple went from almost dying in the 1990s to creating the iPhone, iPad, MacBook, and becoming the most valuable company on Earth. The stock has had countless crashes and corrections over 36 years. In 2000, it dropped 80%. In 2008, it dropped 60%. Every single time, it came back stronger. The lesson of Apple isn't just about the returns, it's about having the conviction to hold through the darkest moments. Amazon went public in 1997, not 1990. But if you had invested $1,000 at IPO in 1997 at $18 per share, today that investment is worth approximately $1.2 million. A 120,000% return in about 28 years. In 1997, Amazon was just an online bookstore. Nobody thought it would become the biggest retailer on Earth, a cloud computing giant, a logistics empire. Jeff Bezos was laughed at. Analysts said books online would never work. The people who invested $1,000 and held for 28 years are now millionaires. But here's the thing. Amazon also crashed 95% during the dot-com bust. Investors who panicked and sold in 2001, when it looked like Amazon might go bankrupt, missed the entire story. The difference between $1,000 and $1.2 million was simply not selling. And now the number that makes everything else look small. Bitcoin. Bitcoin didn't exist in 1990. It was created in 2009. But if you had invested $1,000 in Bitcoin in 2010, when it was trading at fractions of a penny, at roughly $0.003 per coin, you would have bought approximately 333,000 Bitcoins. At Bitcoin's current price above $90,000 in 2026, that $1,000 investment would be worth approximately $30 billion. $30 billion. That is the most insane return in the history of any asset on Earth. But here's the reality check. Almost nobody held Bitcoin from 2010. It crashed 80% in 2011, then 80% again in 2014, then 84% in 2018, then 77% in 2022. Every single time, most people sold. The people who made $30 billion from $1,000 are mythological creatures. They exist, but they're almost impossible to find. Okay, let's put the final leaderboard together. From worst to best. What $1,000 in 1990 is worth in 2026. Cash, $435 in real value. Savings account, $2,900. Bonds, $6,500. Real estate, $4,600 to $90,000 plus with leverage. Gold, $8,600. S&P 500 Index Fund, $39,300. Apple stock, $2.7 million. Amazon stock, $1.2 million. Bitcoin from 2010, theoretically, $30 billion. But the real lesson isn't the numbers, it's the behavior. Every single asset on this list had crashes. Every single asset tested your conviction. The people who got the best results weren't the smartest investors, they were the most patient ones. Time in the market beats timing the market, every single time. So, what should you do with this information? The S&P 500 is the most accessible, most proven, most consistent wealth builder for ordinary people over 36 years. Not the most exciting, not the biggest number, but the most achievable. If you're starting today, the best time to plant that tree was in 1990. The second best time is right now. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't time the market. Just start. Subscribe, because next week we're answering the question, if you invest $1,000 every month from today, what will it be worth in 2056? The number will genuinely change how you think about money forever. Subscribe to Mila Invests. Thank you.